a conductive wire, and you were so electric. I had no say when you.
Hey everyone, welcome to Geekdom is back. We are trying something brand new today. We're doing a roundtable episode for Avengers Endgame, and this is your spoiler warning. If you have not seen it, don't listen to this at all because we are going to spoil everything. And today I am joined by Jonathan Lally, Katie Schaefer, and Mirjani Rawls. You've heard two of them before, but Jonathan was brave enough to make this his first episode. So we all went to see Avengers Endgame opening weekend. Some of us saw it more than once. I was not one of those people. And Katie actually saw it before the rest of us because she's fancy and got a press screening.
Ooh.
So we are going to go ahead and dive right on in here. Hopefully there will be some order to this madness because there was so much going on in this movie. But we're going to start with how we felt the movie was paced, and Jonathan is going to kick things off for us.
First off, I just wanted to thank you for having me.
Of course.
Really pumped to be here, and it's always fun to connect with a friend made on the internet in real, I guess, more real life than the internet itself. But thank you for having me. As far as the pacing of the movie goes, overall, I enjoyed it. I like that they wasted basically no time establishing how bad the situation really was at the beginning. The second act time heist stuff was a little heavy on the comedy at points. I would have liked to have seen them unwittingly pulled into more of the action from some of these past events. But overall, I was okay with it. And then the last hour made good on all of the buildup from the movie and just stuck the landing perfectly. So overall, that's how I thought the pacing of the movie went.
Katie?
Well, I really loved it, kind of from beginning to end. I did think the pacing was a challenge for some people, but I think it worked out with the kind of story they were telling, especially because it's so long. You know, you started out and we get that punch in the gut with Hawkeye, and Tony comes back, and then we're just waiting for 5 years. And there were so many emotional beats and so much going on all at once that they had to resolve, that I'm glad we get that little breather before it all kicks off into high gear. I love how they ended up wrapping up everybody's stories together. And I think they did a really great job with that, especially with those last 5 minutes. Those are all tearjerkers for me.
Yeah, Mirjani, what did you think?
Going into it, I know a lot of people have reservations that this was going to be a 3-hour movie. I saw the movie with a couple friends that I've seen every MCU movie with, and we didn't feel the 3 hours. I kind of do agree with Jonathan that the second act did kind of get along with the time heist stuff, but that third act, that was perfect. Like that last hour, like it was with the battle and especially like how things unraveled. It was just a perfect way to wrap up this Infinity Saga. And it's hard to believe that like we invested like 22, 23 movies into getting to this point. But I think that the Russo brothers did a really good job doing a lot of callbacks and kind of looking forward to like where we could go and like wrapping up the major stories of the original 6 and like incorporating the new people.
Yeah, I agree. For me, I think I kind of took the approach of, okay, let's see what they do with each hour of this movie. And because I looked at it that way, I was like, okay, this hour did this thing, the next hour did this, and then the final hour just destroyed all of the feelings. And for me, I think that made it feel like it wasn't necessarily a 3-hour movie. And that's sort of the key, because I had rewatched Infinity War the day before, and I was like, oh, that didn't feel like a 2.5-hour movie. Probably because I was able to skip through 10 minutes of credits, but that's besides the point. And this one, even with the lengthier credits, I was like, you know what? This sort of paid off by the end of it to where I didn't even care when it finished that it was as long as it was. I was like, yes, okay, this was exactly what I would have expected out of the pace for it, at least, because they did have to pack so much into it.
Yeah, absolutely. I will say this too, just to add on, like I had told all of my friends when some of them were complaining, I said, this could be a 5-hour movie and I'd be happy as hell. You know, it sounds like everyone else has seen a good amount, if not all of these films. I know I have. And it's the payoff was worth it, absolutely. And even the second viewing, like there were certain things that I thought didn't work the first time I saw it, which I'll go into later, but I definitely ended up, after seeing a few other people react to the movie and hearing other people's perspectives on things that I hadn't even considered, a lot of what I thought on the surface, even though they were minor at the beginning, like they didn't really end up mattering the second viewing. I had more of an appreciation after hearing other people react. But yeah, I thought overall the pacing was good. And I think that you're right. There's a lot to unpack and they have to do something with that middle section. And overall, there was a lot of good in that middle section too. So I think I agree with pretty much everyone else here on that.
Yeah. And with this being a comic book movie, obviously they are going to take some things straight from the comic books. We've seen that with Iron Man Extremis being used in Iron Man 3 more specifically than the rest, I believe. And then Civil War was obviously a huge comic book event before the movie ever came out. And while they take some liberty with how they tell these stories because they're doing what works best for the big screen, there were some things from this that came pretty much straight out of the comics. So why don't we run through some of these? The first one we have on our list here is Captain America posing as an agent of Hydra, which was a more recent storyline, if I'm not mistaken, within the last few years. I don't know if it came from something older as well, but that was just a comical moment. And I think it was something that readers of the comics would appreciate in that moment.
For me personally, like I without going too much into my background with comics, because it's very limited. I read, a little bit of X-Men when I was younger, and really didn't even know what the Avengers was until the Iron Man movie, and that whole thing was unraveled from that end credit scene. Like it started all for me. But I knew, I read enough now because of the films. I follow enough comic blogs, even though I'm not personally reading them. And so I knew about that issue of Captain America, Steve Rogers, #1. It's Nick Spencer run, I believe. And I didn't read that. But for me personally, when he said that line, I felt, because I think I do remember reading that it was a very polarizing take on the character, even though it was kind of resolved in this interesting way, I guess. But I thought that was kind of like probably just enough for people that had read that, or, just even for people that maybe didn't even know that comic existed. It's still just a great callback to Winter Soldier in general, that I thought it worked so well. And it was just like, it got a really big round of applause in my screening. That first one, and it was just kind of a delightful joke / way to move the plot along that worked.
Right. We also have Professor Hulk.
Yeah.
Cap getting to be worthy.
Right.
This was something they had teased for a while now. Cap was able to finally hold Mjolnir. I don't know. That's probably wrong. Thor's hammer.
I've heard it pronounced so many ways. I just call it the hammer out of embarrassment myself, because I don't know how it's actually pronounced.
And we obviously get a taste of Captain Marvel from Kelly Sue DeConnick's run, which is one of my favorite things I've read in recent memory. So Katie, along with Cap posing as a Hydra agent, what were sort of some of your thoughts on the comics? Were you already familiar with some of these storylines?
Yeah, I was. I think the one that stuck out the most to me, and that I had the most kind of like, well, how well did they do this, was Professor Hulk. I'm familiar with the, Smart Hulk, but I did enjoy when they brought it together, and it was a nice. There are lots of nods for fans in this one, who like comic reading fans, I mean, in particular. And I loved all of that stuff. And I kind of looked for it like, oh, I wonder if this one. Because I have, some I've read lots of them and some I've only read a few. But in press screenings, like, nobody talks. It's all very quiet. And even there, when Cap says that Hail Hydra thing, everybody gasped. Like, oh, wow. So I liked all of that stuff. I think it's a really great way to nod to the fans. and allow all these other ideas to come in.
Without beating you over the head with it necessarily.
Right. And stuff that we'll never see a full movie of, but it's still cool that we get to see a little bit of it, especially the Cap wielding Mjolnir. That was just so fantastic.
Yeah, I just to kind of circle back, because for Professor Hulk, for me, I thought, I remember reading that Mark Ruffalo and Kevin Feige had both commented on how Hulk in his own storyline trilogy of sorts had, started with Ragnarok, carried through Infinity War, and then would conclude with Endgame. And after multiple viewings of each of these movies, some more than I'd like to admit, I think that's an accurate assessment. I think I think a lot of us expected Professor Hulk, but I had personally no idea how much I would actually enjoy it. Once again, because I am a casual comic person, I'd been reading enough speculation between the last year and now, and I really, really like how it came together. I thought it was just delightful, down to him back at New York talking, seeing old Hulk and then being embarrassed and saying, I think this is gratuitous or whatever, and smashing the car. I thought that was so funny. Cap wielding Mjolnir, or however I've heard it pronounced. I thought this was basically fan service of the highest order, and another payoff for those of us who watch every film, just remembering Cap attempting and almost succeeding to lift Thor's hammer in Age of Ultron, and then Thor's shocked reaction, and then it just all culminates with him saying, "I knew it." It's just, it was so nice, because, it's like it repays a lot of us who watched some of the movies that personally I didn't think were as good, but still watched all of them. And then, just the bonus laugh of Thor telling Cap he can only use the little one and he has to leave Stormbreaker for him. It was just all, just big old payoffs, and I was super happy with it. Marjani, how'd you feel about it?
Well, the comic book nerd in me was very happy to see a lot of the stuff. Captain Marvel's haircut that she has now, the shorter haircut, and especially like in the beginning of the movie, and of course this was a clip that went out where, her and Roddy are talking, and she's like, well, there are other places than Earth that don't have you guys, so that's why I wasn't there. Like, okay, well, that's kind of more of the recent comic book run where she's like all over the place trying to help people.
Yeah.
The Captain America and Hydra thing was funny because I loved how they used it as kind of like a plot device to get him through to the next thing, and it was just kind of like a ha-ha moment. Like my theater, like everybody like laughed, and gasped, and they're like, "What?" Cat wielding Mjolnir, or I'm pretty sure I messed it up, but
we have 4 different pronunciations of it already. It's fine. We're all good.
And I bet all of us have it wrong, and that makes it much better, right?
They're gonna be like, they have it wrong. Yeah, I loved it. I especially, like you said, going back to that Age of Ultron scene where he barely moves it, and you see Thor like in the corner, like, like, and then like he not move it, and then he's like, phew. But yeah, it was kind of like the culmination of Cap's hero arc, and him being so pure and selfless and whatnot, and like using that. And Professor Hulk, I know that they can't use Hulk as a standalone, but it's neat to see them show like Hulk go through these stages, like you said, like with Ragnarok, like with Infinity War, even with Avengers and Age of Ultron, where he's kind of out of control and goes into space to kind of figure things out. Now he's like come full circle, and now he's Professor Hulk, like he's the mix of the two. So I thought that was really cool, like especially from a person who's a big Hulk fan.
I think they did a nice job just putting them in at just the right moments too. Captain America posing as Hydra comes at a time where they know there are Hydra agents there now, but they didn't at the time. So it's like, okay, we're going to use this knowledge to our advantage. And he even does it again later when he yells at himself, Bucky is alive, so he can distract himself long enough to knock himself out.
I completely forgotten about that. That was so great.
Yeah, so they sort of just took these things straight from the comics and put them in a way where you're like, okay, I'm glad we finally got to see these things happen, because a lot of these characters we won't see. going forward. And that's just because, like we've said, 20 plus movies of the main Avengers group, the actors are probably going to want to do a few things that aren't Marvel related. And it's sort of just a given that even though, it's not like everyone dies in this movie, major spoiler there, obviously, not everyone dies. But it's one of those things where it's like, as fans, we kind of know that this group is coming to an end, regardless of who lives or dies. It's just something that's going to happen. So they gave us just enough of these things that we wanted to see out of these characters and that they've hinted at before. And it just worked so well for me.
You got to think about it like this is really unprecedented to have these certain actors play these characters for 11 years. Yeah. When has that ever happened? Like, it's usually a one and done or a trilogy. Like Robert Downey Jr. has been kicking at this since 2008.
Yeah.
So like, that's insane.
Yeah, it's honestly like just an incredible amount of storytelling, and really like kudos has to be given to people like Kevin Feige and Jon Favreau for really kicking it all off, and showing us what a comic book movie could be. Whenever I think about that, I'm like, yeah, the payoff was absolutely worth it.
Yeah, definitely. One of the main characters in this, even though she's not in it a ton, did just get her own solo movie. So we see Carol Danvers, also known as Captain Marvel, come lend a hand because she makes a comment pretty early on in the movie that, there are lots of other planets out there and not all of them have an Avengers protecting them, basically. And that sort of sinks in with the entire group when they're kind of like, well, where were you? It's like, well, you aren't the only planets. Other people have other problems too. And were you guys all pleased with the amount of screen time that Captain Marvel had in this? Because, obviously just coming off of her solo movie, they teased that she would be in this. We all kind of knew going into this that she would be in it, but were you surprised with how much or how little they used of her?
Personally, I thought she was used the perfect amount, and I really enjoyed Captain Marvel. I rank it like as far as all the 22 films go, it's like somewhere near the top half of the middle. Like,
okay,
it's really good, but it's I still rank it above other solo films for sure, and thought she did a wonderful job, and I was very excited to see more of her. But I thought, I think that some of the stuff, and I heard it coming from both camps of people that loved her and were excited about her, and then also people that just hated her based on some really, really mild, not even offensive comments that the actress had made. And they were all like, oh, I'm so worried she's going to be in this movie. I thought she was, oh, she's going to come in and overpower. And I thought she was used perfectly. I like that they pulled a lot of what she had said in that DeConnick run, about, there's other places out there that like intergalactic stuff needs my help. Not everyone has the Avengers. Having her show off the powers at the very beginning when they overpower Thanos that first time, and then they figure out the resolution. And then, at the end coming in and helping ultimately turn the tides against him, him needing to rely on the Power Stone to even get in a hit shows us how powerful she really is. I love that she had this quick, really cute interaction with Peter Parker, introducing themselves. And it really showed that because she had to come in and help turn the tides, it really shows that the next mega villain will really need to be pretty powerful to pose any sort of threat, at least with her in the equation.
At first, I was a little disappointed with how little of her there is in the movie. We see her in the beginning, and then that's kind of it till the end. But after the movie was over, I totally agree, Jonathan. I was just very pleased with how well they balanced having this incredibly powerful character brought into a situation, and it works best that way because it allows the original team to really shine, and that's ultimately how I was okay with it. I can't wait for the next Captain Marvel, though.
Same Z's. I'm super excited for what they can do with her now, and selfish me would love like the new hip cool, badass haircut wielding Carol Danvers, but they have so much backstory that they can fill with her that they can ultimately go any way for a long time. And, but yeah, I agree with you. I think that them giving time to the original group and then a few other people was perfect. And it made me really, I think the scenes that they had her in were just perfect. I thought she did such a killer job, especially given that she hadn't even shot her movie yet. You know, when you consider all of that, it's pretty incredible.
True. Marvel likes their planning. MJ, what did you think of how much screen time Captain Marvel had?
I really thought it was perfect given, I mean, it may feel like it's months ago, but she did just have like her own solo movie. And going into Endgame, I really, thought, hey, this is going to be about the original. And I read an interview with Kevin Feige saying that, she is super powerful, but there was going to be kind of checks. So I thought that it wasn't about the screen time that she had. It was about how they used her in screen time. And I thought that it was great enough to show that she's powerful. And not only that she's going to be a leader moving forward. I think when you started off the movie and saying like, there are other planets that need me and that don't have you guys, that opens up a plethora of stories that you go after Endgame. Like, where did she go? Like, who did she help? Who is she helping now? Like, why does she have to keep going? Like, even in the hologram scene where she's like, I'm going to be going away for a while. Like, you guys might not hear from me.
Right.
Like, it leaves so many doors open for Carol Danvers just to kind of like tell her tale. So I thought it was perfect.
I agree. And by the time we get that hologram scene, it's already 5 years later. So you get the sense that Natasha also understands, and the rest of them understand by now that, there's this specific thing that Captain Marvel can do that the rest of them can't. And it's why she is needed in so many other places besides Earth. So not only does the movie make the rest of the Avengers understand that, they make the fans understand it along the way too. And that's why, Katie were able to be okay with the limited amount of screen time she had by the end of the movie, because this isn't Captain Marvel's story to finish. She's there to lend a hand, but really it's the original group, and they're finishing what they started all those years ago. And that was something that was, I think, really crucial to making Captain Marvel's appearance work as well as it did. She's obviously super powerful, and you get that sense every time she's on screen, but we don't need an overload of it. So I really love that balance there. And she comes in and, she holds Thanos off as long as she can, but she's not the one who has to finish the fight. And that is left to Tony, which we will be talking about in a bit here. Although, speaking of Tony, my next question for all of you is whether or not Doctor Strange knew all along that Tony would figure it out. Do you think when he handed over the Time Stone in Infinity War that he knew in the back of his mind? Because both he and Tony are so stubborn and brilliant, but in different ways. I feel like he just suddenly put all of his faith in Tony when he gave Thanos the Time Stone in Infinity War, knowing that he would be able to figure it out, because he had already seen all of the outcomes. What was it, like over 14 million of them or something, and they only won in one?
Yeah.
So did you guys get that feeling when you find out that, he wasn't supposed to willingly give over the Time Stone?
I thought that was such a great attempt at kind of not just explaining his motivations behind giving away the stone and why he might have done that, even though, Bruce was so many years early. But I also thought that I really liked his commitment to the end, but I also liked that scene and what it did in explaining about the branch universe, and like tried to do a decent job at attempting to explain how this all works, because a lot of this stuff, we're obviously using our imaginations. It is an entertainment piece, but I thought that the Ancient One piecing Strange's plan together in front of the audience and surrendering the Time Stone to Bruce, this was good. I thought this was a good thing, and I do think that this was the only way, it seemed like. Mm-hmm. And I love that people had also kind of side thing about Strange, and obviously this has been alluded to before, even him, but when he said we're in the end game now, and Marvel was playing coy with the title of this movie, but yet everyone had pretty much called it. I definitely, I thought that resonated a bunch, and I always think about that, and I think about his line and how he knows what's going on, and I think that also makes him poised to be a really interesting character going forward too.
Yeah, I liked how they made this work, and I thought it was a better way to describe exactly how their time traveling works, rather than in when they're in the lab or whatever, and Hulk kind of tries to straighten him out, like, oh no, your past is your past and your future is now your past and all that stuff. Like, I thought that the Ancient One's explanation of, like, this is how it goes, this is how it works, was neat and well done. And I think it made it easier for me to totally believe that Doctor Strange knew. He knew what he was doing when Tony, that he has to keep Tony alive because he's the one who has to win. If they don't have him, then nothing will work. So I think he knew, and I think he did his best with it.
Yeah, I think he knew. Going back to Katie's point and the talk with the Ancient One, and giving away the time stone, she was like, why would he do that? But he must have had a reason, because Strange is the best of us. So I have to trust it. And I feel, especially with kind of like starting with Age of Ultron, there's always been this like creeping sense of like death, or not death, but like sacrifice with Tony, especially with the vision that he had of everybody dying and like him trying to do things to avoid it. But it's like with fate, you know what I mean? Like, once it's set, it's done. And I felt that, Doctor Strange seeing that was kind of an extension of that. And it kind of brought the home of Tony eventually dying and giving himself up for the cause, doing the snap. So yeah, worked for me.
Yeah, for me, it was one of those things where when I went back and watched Infinity War, I was like, okay, we know for a fact that he has seen all of the outcomes because he says as much. And then you can tell there is a little bit of hesitation when he's handing over the time stone, but you also get the sense that he has faith that Tony is the one person who is smart enough to make it work. And obviously they have to know that Tony isn't going to turn to dust in Infinity War for all of this to work. So once you get the explanation from the Ancient One and Bruce's conversation, you're like, yeah, okay, it's clear that this is being pushed by Doctor Strange, even though he's not around. He knew right off the bat. Well, not right off the bat, but as soon as he saw all of the outcomes, he knew what had to be done to drive Tony to figure things out. And maybe he didn't know it would take a little help from Scott Lang, but it was something that happened because everyone else was under the impression that Scott was just missing like everyone else. They had no idea he was in the quantum realm and that a mouse would bring him back. I don't think any of us saw the mouse bringing him back as how he got back, but I think it just all worked out, and Doctor Strange knew that Tony would have to be the one to figure this out because, one, they're kind of both arrogant enough to think they have the answer to the problem, and in this case, they were right. They both technically had the answer to it.
Yeah, they both even argue a lot in Infinity War. So it was cool to kind of like for him to have that moment. As soon as Tony looked at Doctor Strange and he flashed up that one finger, I was like, oh,
here we go.
Here it comes.
Here's the time.
Yeah.
Here it comes. Like, it's about to be over. Like, somebody's got to make a decision here. So
that was a great scene. And honestly, like, that was one of my favorite parts about just meeting Doctor Strange for the first time in his film, was thinking about, oh man, it would be so great to see this ego go up against the ego of Tony Stark and barely fit inside the room. And we got that with these two characters. And I think we really got, they both, and I had heard someone else, we might get to this later, but like, Doctor Strange is honestly, I think, a serious contender, if not Captain Marvel. I'd like to see Captain Marvel lead the team, but Doctor Strange has got a lot of sense of urgency as well. And I think that that's, something that he has demonstrated many times. But yeah, that was such a great interaction. And that last scene that you referenced with him flashing him the one with his finger was just, it was great.
Yeah, even the interaction when, they're talking briefly and he said, like, how do we win? He's like, well, if I told you, it wouldn't happen.
Yeah.
So good. Yeah. Since we just brought up Tony's death, we have another big death that happens, and that is Natasha sacrificing herself so that they can get the Soul Stone, which we already knew that was the case in order to get that stone based on what we saw in Infinity War. But did it surprise you? Did any of the deaths surprise you in this, really?
So for me personally, and I'll go through, like, I guess everything that I considered a death or a send off boy. But Black Widow was a complete shock to me, and it made sense, and it made me appreciate Natasha so much more. And obviously I've been appreciating her over these last few films, even with things in Ultron where she's calming Hulk down and she has this just like, she's keeping the Avengers together in wake of whatever happened at the end of Infinity War. And, what better way to rid your ledger of all of that red than to sacrifice yourself and bringing back half the population, right? I mean, at first I was disappointed that she didn't get more fighting in, but her delivery of some of those lines across this film made up for it so much. I felt awful for her in this film. You could just really tell, and she was doing her best to keep everything together. And then when the quantum realm timeline theories started brewing after the first trailer, I suspected the Soul Stone would still require a sacrifice of a loved one. That was the one thing that kept my head scratching. I'm like, okay, well, someone's going to have to give themselves up. And I was thinking, well, in my head, the most logical, explanation was Cap. Would bring him full circle with Red Skull. But I'm glad that, as soon as Black Widow and Hawkeye show up on Vormir, I'm like, wait, no, this isn't happening.
Yeah.
And that final fight that they had, it was just, they loved each other, and they've really done a great job establishing that. But
in a very platonic way, she's not trying to steal Clint from his wife or anything.
Yeah. Of course not. No. But just they have that friendship. They have that loving friendship. I love so many of my friends, and I understand that. And he had, been responsible, I believe, for pulling her into the good side, early in her career. I believe she said that somewhere in the films. And, to see it come full circle was just so touching, and so sad. And yeah, it was just a gut punch. I didn't expect it until they showed up on Vormir. Even when they're like showing them, who's pairing off with which stones, I didn't even think about it there. I was just not until they showed up, and it was just not waiting. I didn't expect it. If we're talking about other deaths, Tony, I assumed we would get his death, but I was just really hoping we wouldn't. When they established that he had a kid, I was also like stupidly assuming that he would be spared, and was like breathing a little sigh of relief. And then, just based on the fact that he's indicated how much he loves playing the character, I had assumed that they would retire him, and he'd be around for the occasional cameo in future films. And his death just once again utterly gutted me. I wasn't prepared for any of those emotions. The role reversal of him and Peter between Infinity War and Endgame, Pepper telling him he can rest.
We won, Mr. Stark. We won.
We won.
Tears,
and
instant tears.
Yeah.
That scene that hit on all the right notes. It hit on all the right notes. The exchange between Happy Hogan and Morgan Stark about cheeseburgers at the end, just, oh man, all the feels. And while I don't consider this necessarily a death, but I had assumed Captain America would die. He was the one that just made the most sense to me. Yeah. And while he didn't exactly die per se, I'm glad that they wrapped up his character arc with a happy ending and retirement. And I thought that was very tastefully handled. And it was like everyone wanted that ending for Cap. So I think, like, as far as like deaths and whatnot go, I think we've more or less covered it, or at least I've covered it as far as how I feel about those deaths. I don't think I missed anyone, did I? Anyone else die that I forgot about? I hope not. But yeah, that's how I felt.
I do have something I want to bring up about Gamora, but I will do that during my turn if Katie or MJ do not get to it first.
Yes, please, by all means.
God, I did not see Black Widow's death coming at all. And I was like, okay, how are they going to do this? And then when they get to the planet, it was just, oh no, oh no.
Oh no.
And I went back and forth, like, as I'm watching the movie, like, okay, who should it be and who's it going to be? And it does make much more sense for Black Widow. You know, she's lost everything and she's getting that red out of her ledger, like you said, and she's just gives such a great performance. I think we got to see Scarlett Johansson really show her skills in this.
Yeah.
She usually isn't asked to do very much real acting as Black Widow, you know, because she just kind of is be a badass. And that's all she has to do. But in this, there's just so many complicated emotions for her, and how we see her in the beginning, the 5 years at point, she's just so worn down and defeated by the failure. And it feels like a fitting, but still incredibly sad ending for her character. And Tony, I also didn't think he would die. I figured like, oh no, they'll keep him alive and he'll retire or something. But then once the battle started, it kind of dawned on me that like, okay, I don't know, somebody's got to die here, and it's either going to be Cap or it's going to be Tony. And his ending is also incredibly well handled, and his acting in that scene. I mean, Robert Downey Jr. has shown his skills in every movie he's in this series. And the last line that he has is perfect. I am Iron Man. And then done. Was a kick in the head, man. I started like real crying at that point. Like, oh God, no. And then I thought, okay, we can't lose Cap. I refuse to allow that to happen. So, but there is one more, is Nebula. Old Nebula dies.
Yes.
True.
And I liked that, I don't know, new Nebula? Good Nebula. We'll call her Good Nebula. Good Nebula kills her past self rather than allow her to, you know, destroy everything. And I loved how they handled Nebula in this movie. I was so pleased to get her side of things and see her develop as beyond that very stern and
stubborn.
Yeah, stern and no fun.
Yeah.
We do not have fun here. We are here to work all the time type personality. And she really comes into her own a little bit, and we see her motivations and why she does the things she does. So, and Cap, I thought the ending, I figured when I saw the time travel thing, I was like, okay, cool, Cap's going back. Especially when he doesn't have any interactions except with him, like with a past emotional connection. Like the rest of them all get that. He fights himself, but he only watches Peggy. He doesn't get to talk to her. He doesn't get to do anything. So I thought it was just perfect for them to send him back. And that Bucky knew, that was great. That was perfect.
I didn't even realize that line that they speak to each other is the same line from the first movie, and it's just reversed. And I didn't realize that, but oh man, that was I got the sense that I got the sense that Bucky knew too. He like knew what was going on, and didn't make it. But it was like a happy ending. It was bittersweet, you know,
but peaceful for Cap. Yeah,
peaceful.
Yes.
It was
something he deserved.
He deserved it. He had done his work, you know. I think the way I justified a lot of, like, even if they didn't die, the retirements a lot of these characters, you know, from their standpoint, they've done everything they can to stop the biggest threat until the next one presents itself. You know, it doesn't really. I felt like they just wrapped everything up so wonderfully, even though, like, even with Nat and Bruce, you know, I think a lot of people, myself included, were hoping that they would get together. But at the same time, I think it makes the story so much stronger that they didn't, and that she had, her sacrifice really meant something. And it was so, watching him find that out was just in of itself like watching her die twice. It's like it was hard. It was really, really hard. So yeah, I think, and when you spoke about, new versus old Nebula, like we saw so much development just in those scenes with her and Tony at the beginning, from her like swatting away the football to her hoisting him up and making him comfortable and trying to console him in a way, and just her consoling Rocket. We've seen a lot of character development with her, so I'm happy that she stuck around.
I'm going to go with a non-death first.
Okay.
Because I for sure thought that Captain America was going to die.
Yeah.
Like, I thought that, if you read the comic, Thanos kills him. I thought that he was going to make the ultimate sacrifice. But I was satisfied that it happened this way. Like, that he had a happily ever after giving the shield up to Falcon. That shot where he's holding the shield and there's a wedding ring, and how the movie essentially ended with him slow dancing with Peggy. I thought that was beautiful. Iron Man has always been my road dog from the beginning. Like, he went from this narcissistic jerk to realizing that he had a purpose to, this whole arc throughout the entire MCU, mentor to Peter, being so scared that he has the, Sokovia Accords and kind of being at odds with Cap. And then with this movie, seeing his father in the past and kind of, making amends with that, making amends with Cap. So it was awesome because it was a full circle moment for him. So him dying was, and the way he died, like just being selfish, and like what Katie said when he said, I am Iron Man. For me, like that was one of the best things about the movie. I did not see Nat dying. I don't think any of us did.
No.
Especially like, she's supposed to have a standalone movie. I guess it's going to be a prequel now.
Yeah, that's what I would assume as well, too. I really, honestly, and I know this sounds, I don't mean this in a vindictive way. I think that they need to keep her dead. I don't want them to undo, like, how much I just utterly fell in love with her character all over again in this movie. Like, I think Katie mentioned, that she gave the performance of her career as far as the MCU, and in my opinion, her career within the MCU, this was the performance of a lifetime for that. And I just didn't see it coming at all. And that was rough.
Yeah, there's like two things that happen that like going to Nat, with Hulk wearing the Infinity Gauntlet, he's like, I wished for her to come back.
He tried.
It didn't happen. I tried and it didn't happen. And then Clint is having a conversation with Scarlet Witch, and he's like, I wish she knew, how much, of there. And she's like, she knows. And then they're talking about Vision, and he's like, yeah, he knows too. It's in a weird way. Like you said, like, I hope it doesn't happen, but in a weird way, it kind of leaves. I thought it left like the door open for that. So
yeah.
So I'm like, oh, all right, well, maybe in some other timeline, Nat
they're doing something. Yeah.
Yeah, Nat is back somewhere,
Yeah. I would imagine her film is going to be a prequel. And I honestly would rather see that because I want to see her early spy days and like getting recruited by S.H.I.E.L.D. and maybe some more Hawkeye. Like it opens up a lot of possibilities, especially like we might also get Young Fury again. It's already worked so well in Captain Marvel. I wouldn't be opposed to Young Fury again, but I'm selfish. It's just like selfish reason. I'd love it to be a prequel, but I'm just glad that she's getting a movie and it's well deserved. And I think especially after this, people are going to be extra hyped on her character. And so, I think it's a good time, and I think Marvel really knows what they're doing here. And I fingers crossed it continues.
Well, no, I think it'd be cool to have a movie that's just kind of her doing the espionage thing, and not really like necessarily about like powers and stuff like that. Just her doing her spy thing.
Yeah.
So but overall, deaths, I thought they hit the right beats. I know in Infinity War we lost Vision, we lost Loki.
Heimdall.
Yeah, Heimdall. Yeah, that was kind of sad. So yeah, I think, going forward and us needing kind of like new leaders, like unfortunately Iron Man had to go, Captain America, had to walk off into the sunset and stuff. But yeah, I think it definitely hit the emotional beats and brought these characters full circle.
Yeah, I went into this thinking that for sure Tony and Cap would die. And while that was kind of true, because, Cap is just going to die of old age eventually, and it looks like pretty soon based on how much they aged him up in this. And, I wasn't totally sure how Tony would die, but Nat's death surprised me the most. And what I like is that they really earned that death, in my opinion. And as someone who wasn't necessarily a fan of how they handled the character in Age of Ultron, I think they redeemed her so much in this movie. And, like you have all been saying, this was her big moment. And it totally worked and paid off not only for the character, but for the story. And MJ, you mentioned the Infinity War deaths. And, we see Gamora in this, but we see a past version of her. But I think because the past is still the past, Thanos still snapped half the people out of existence. To me, that means Gamora still has to be dead, even though she shows up in this in a different form, because they couldn't bring Nat back. So I don't see how they possibly bring Gamora back other than the whole alternate timeline Gamora being back. So that's something that I think will be interesting to see. But what I like the most is that they didn't completely overdo it on the deaths. They didn't kill off the entire original Avengers. And if they had done that, I think, a lot of people would have been very, very upset, because it would have felt excessive. And they didn't go that route, which makes me think, that even though we probably won't see a lot of them again, we're more understanding of why we wouldn't see them again. It's not necessarily because they die. Cap wanted to grow old with Peggy, and we all wanted that for him. Professor Hulk is probably going to go do his professor things and
you teach a little college, be a university professor.
Yeah, or do like a research
school.
lab kind of thing, and sort of just maybe do what like Hank Pym was doing in his old age and everything like that. And he's still around. So, we still have plenty of characters who are still around and could potentially pop back in future movies as needed or something like that. And I think that was a good move. But for the most part, it was Nat's death that surprised me. But Katie, I'm glad you brought up Nebula, because Nebula, I believe at this point, is more machine than not. So, I think her killing her old self didn't necessarily need to kill the new version of her, because she is mostly mechanical at this point, if I'm not mistaken. So it was definitely a little tricky with that one, but time travel always is.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's like some Terminator stuff, I feel like going back and killing like the machine version or whatever, and it doesn't try. Yeah.
Yeah. But speaking of old Captain America, what did you all think of his decision as to who would take his mantle after he, goes back and lives out his days with Peggy?
I'm honestly perfectly fine with the choice of Falcon. And I think most readers of the source materials would be too. A piece of me had the only reason, and I will say this, the only piece of me that had hoped it would be Bucky was since he and Steve had spent more time together. But then when you really start to look at it, and I also would have liked to see just Bucky in general trade guns for a shield. It would have been a little nice, thing. But the thing that I like the most and that really makes sense with Falcon is it gives him lots more space to grow with the character. But then also, if you think about Steve and Sam, their moral compasses were already really closely aligned, as evidenced by Steve taking part in the decimated support group as kind of a callback to Sam Wilson, urging him in Winter Soldier to join part in his veteran support group. And yeah, they really, it's easy to forget that. And I think it's going to be interesting watching him. And I'm really curious to see how this impacts not just how he will act, but also look in the Winter Soldier Falcon Disney Plus show that's coming, and then in future movies. So I think I was just happy that they did that. I'm just happy that someone actually did get to pass. They did pass it, and it did actually go to someone that was in the comics. So I think that was also, once again, another great nod to people who enjoy the comics or any of the source material.
Yeah, I think I totally agree that Bucky, well, it would have been cool to see him. I don't think Bucky has the same moral compass, like you said, of Sam and Cap. They are very similar people who lived, different, but more similar lives than he and Bucky. Bucky is, I think, feels compromised. Like he feels like he is a compromised person.
He's a Red Ledger. He's like a Red Ledger, I guess. It's like similar.
He wouldn't be able to be the Captain America. He's far too sad all the time for that. Whereas Falcon is just perfect to take on the role and has all that experience to draw on of spending time with Cap and learning from him. The only question I have about it is he going to go super soldier now? Because he's just a dude with a flying suit. Like, he kind of needs, if you're going to be Captain America, you got to have more than just the flying suit. So that's my question, is how they're going to resolve that issue, or if they're just going to brush it aside.
Yeah, and just touching on that was kind of one of the reasons I would have liked to see Bucky as well, is just because you're like, oh, they're both like injected with the serum. It's like, a trade for a trade. But I was really pleasantly, I'm happy with Falcon doing it, and I'm definitely excited to see where they're going to take it. I completely agree. Mirjani, what do you think?
I was okay with it because in the comic, Falcon becomes Captain America. So
right, it
was pretty cool. And I know when Falcon's talking to him, he's like, the shield doesn't feel like it's mine. And, Steve's like, it's okay. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I chose you and whatnot. And going back to you guys' points, like, I feel that Bucky's also compromised. So, like, there might be a chance that he turns rogue again. So I don't know if he could really be a Captain America. But I think the bond between, Bucky and Steve is just kind of just like enough. So I was cool with it. It's going to be interesting to see how that show goes because, like you said, Falcon doesn't have super soldier serum. He is just a regular guy. So I don't know how he's going to really fight villains. Like, I would assume like Red Skull or somebody like that. That's going to be very interesting to see how they handle that. But yeah, I was satisfied.
Yeah, I think one of my favorite parts of that scene is actually when Bucky knows that it's going to be Sam and he sends Sam over there because he's sort of just like, you know what, it's this guy's time. I have my own issues that maybe he still needs to sort out, even though I would imagine that spending all of that time in Wakanda sort of cleared his head of everything.
Yeah.
He was there for quite a while, just recovering and getting his new arm, and in a way, that arm is kind of like a shield already for him based on the Wakandan tech that was probably put in it. So I think it's a good move for the story going forward. We have seen quite a bit of Bucky and Sam, but I think Sam is sort of the one who has earned more screen time going forward, especially with taking over the Captain America mantle and just the passing of the torch being similar to how it was in the recent comics, which I have not read, just full disclosure there. I do know quite a bit about the comics, but it doesn't mean I've necessarily read them all. And I just thought this was a really nice moment to let us all know, this is what Cap wants. He has made his decision, and even though he will always stick with Bucky, he knew that it had to be Sam who took over that mantle. I know we have talked about quite a few scenes here in specific, but I want to dive on into some of our favorite moments from this movie because there are a lot of moments in this movie. So, this is something we don't necessarily need to do a deep dive on, but I'm just curious if we all sort of had some scenes that we all loved, or if there's a big variety here because there were so many scenes in this.
So a personal favorite for my list is Ant-Man reuniting with his daughter 5 years later and what feels like 5 hours to him. I feel like I'm one of the few people who holds Ant-Man and the sequel in such high regard. I'm constantly just like acting shocked when people are like, "Hey, he's not my favorite." And I just think he's so wonderful. And so this was just a touching scene to watch play out. Him saying, "You're so big," seems to be a reference or potential foreshadowing to her becoming the hero's stature, like in the comics. I would hope to see this explored in a third Ant-Man film. I really hope we just get another Ant-Man film every time. When we got announced a sequel, I was so happy. And it would be great to watch Scott, Cassie, and Hope all suit up in kind of like some sort of, pseudo family third movie. Would be kind of neat.
Yeah.
And then the other scene that I wrote down was Thor explaining the Reality Stone in character as the dude attempting to make sense in general of the Thor Dark World plot and its place in all of this. It was nice to watch Rene Russo single-handedly boost Thor's morale when everyone else had been more or less sympathetic to his transfer. They had not been sympathetic at all to his transformation or his feelings, and his mom really just comes in and saves the day. And I think she was fairly underutilized in other films, so this was really nice to see Rene Russo get a good chunk of impressive dialogue in this one. But yeah, it was just also really funny to take what I consider, it's literally my least favorite Marvel movie is Dark World, and I'm now learning what I've learned recently. I would have loved to see what a Patty Jenkins Dark World would have looked like.
You and me both.
All four of us.
Oh, yeah. Everybody here.
I didn't even realize that was the case until recently. And now knowing that, I'm like, oh, man, Marvel really shit the bed on that one.
No wonder Natalie Portman doesn't want to play in your movie anymore.
Yeah. And I do believe that her stuff was, I don't think she was on set. I think that they just used B-roll from Dark World, but she was at the premiere, so it seems like they've more or less, mended the fences in some way. But yeah, those were my favorite scenes.
Yeah, I thought the Ant-Man stuff was so powerful in the beginning, and my favorite sad scene, I guess we'll call it, is when he realizes something has gone wrong, and he goes and finds that monument, and he's just running and trying to find his daughter and to make sure she's not there, and then finds himself. That was so well done. And I personally am not, I am one of those people who Ant-Man is not my favorite.
Which is fine. It's just fine. I love Paul Rudd and I love San Francisco, so ultimately I just have to put that out there. But yeah, I totally understand. Sorry, go ahead.
No, it's totally fine. They give him the opportunity to do some real good acting in this and to kind of take his character to a place that it doesn't usually go. His movies are pretty light and fun and funny, and there's not a whole lot of emotional stakes to them like this. We don't get to see him like this before, and he knocks it out of the park, I thought. And I enjoyed that final scene on the ship with the Guardians and Thor. I loved that. I loved what they did with Thor in this, that they make him a very flawed human being, and he physically changes. He becomes an alcoholic. He is someone who's been very emotionally damaged by the Infinity War, and that he finds his lost mojo again and comes back into it, and we get to see that happy smiling Thor again at the end was just a delight. And that Chris Pratt thinks that he's the leader that Thor can be there. That also was quite good for me. Wrong Chris. There's only one right Chris, and it's not Chris Pratt.
That whole exchange was just wonderful, and just him saying "as Guardians of the Galaxy" is not something I knew I needed until I heard the words uttered.
Yes. Exactly. What did you think, Marjani?
I thought the first time that Peter and Tony see each other again, that was awesome. Because I know how Tony felt so bad and so guilty. Even though he has his own daughter, he looks at Peter as a son. And Peter's like, it's been 5 years. He was trying to talk to him during the battle. But it was so good to see them together. I love that when they first go to see Thor, and Rocket Raccoon's like, what the hell? And then you see Korg back.
Yes.
Thank God.
Korg.
And they're playing video games and whatnot, and Thor is out of shape. That was funny. And I guess my favorite sad scene is, I guess, the funeral. And when they kind of like, lay the wreath out to the lake, and where the first thing, Tony Stark has a heart. The camera pans and you see kind of everybody. You see Maria Hill. You see, you know, uh, Nick Fury. You see like all this history of kind of like these movies, and it was like, oh wow, like we've really been here for like 11 years, and we've really grown and up with these characters and seen them kind of like formulate to who they are now. So I thought that was pretty good.
Yeah, even the Ty Simpkins cameo that none of my other friends
Yeah,
recognized.
the kid.
Yeah. I love that.
I only knew that because I had read it, and one of that he had shown up on IMDb. Even I think it was like right after Infinity War had come out, and so I knew that they were going to include him in some way. And everyone was scratching their head in my screen except for me.
That was that kid?
Yeah.
That was the kid from Iron Man
it was-
3? Oh,
Yeah.
awesome. I didn't know that was him either.
Yeah, he's great. He's done some growing up,
A little bit.
but yeah, a little bit. But yeah, I'm sorry to interject, but yeah, that scene was, wow, it was so tough.
Oh yeah, the Happy Morgan cheeseburger scene. Oh
Yeah.
man, like it went back to like the first Iron Man, where like he gets back and he's like, the first thing I want is a cheeseburger. Let's get the cheeseburger, and then like he's asking Morgan, he's like, I'll get all the cheeseburgers you want. I'm like, wow, that's really sad.
Yeah, I'm glad that we're getting a continuation of some of these characters in Spider-Man and stuff, and
Yeah.
the door is open for so many things. But yeah, that was tough.
Yeah, for me, one of the scenes that really stood out was between Tony and Pepper when he has figured out the whole time travel thing. And you can tell that she is so used to him having to run off and save the world that even though those 5 years have been nice for the two of them, and they sort of just get to lay low, enjoy the family life, immediately she's like, you have to do this. And I think it's because of that connection they established between him and Peter. It was one of those things where Peter was sort of like Tony's first kid, basically. And that relationship was just so strong that, Mirjani, I agree with you, that reunion between those two characters was a really great moment, but it's Pepper pushing him to just go and do this, or really sort of giving him permission to go and do it, because we all know that Tony kind of does what he wants anyway. And Tony's main stipulation is that, I will not lose my family so that this can happen. We have to find a way to keep it all intact. And he does that, even though he sort of brushes off Scott's idea at first. It's like, Scott might not be the brightest person, but there is some truth to what he's saying. And I just really like that moment between him and Pepper where they're both sort of in agreement that this is a thing that needs to happen, even if it needs to happen a little reluctantly, because in the end, you can tell that Tony knows exactly what he has to do as soon as Doctor Strange puts up that one finger. And in that moment, we all know what Tony has to do. So, I really like that moment just because there have been so many Tony and Pepper moments over the years, but I think that was sort of the crux of their relationship just in that one scene right there, without him being too over the top about anything like he was in some of the Iron Man movies, like going all off the rails and everything like that. It was a very civilized conversation between the two.
Yeah.
And, I just think it worked so well. And as far as, the sad moments, there were a lot of them, but it definitely, for me, was the Natasha and Clint scene. Just that whole scene there where there's no way that Natasha is going to let Clint sacrifice himself, because she knows deep down that this is going to work and he's going to get his family back.
Yeah. Oh God, that was. I think that's what made it so tough too. Is like we talked about earlier. They truly love each other. They're such good friends that it couldn't have gone any other way, right? When they showed up on Vormir, I was like, they're not going to foreshadow him losing his whole family and then not have him get to see them again. And Natasha's family was Clint, and the rest of them. So that was there's so many sad and bittersweet moments in this whole film.
Yeah, just to kind of touch on like the Pepper and Tony thing. there was one thing that he mentioned. He's like, okay, we're going to do this, but to bring back what we lost in the past, but I want to keep what I have right now.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
I'm like, oh no, is he cursing himself? Like, is he
Yeah.
gonna lose?
Ugh.
Is either he gonna lose stuff or they're gonna lose him? So I'm like, oh no, oh, something's gonna happen here. Something's gonna go wrong. But yeah, he ended up sacrificing himself.
Yeah, going wrong was going right, or according to
Yeah.
plan in this case. But yeah, it was yeah, you're right. That scene where he's talking to them and he's talking about the Deutsch proposition and all of these other things, and he says he's like, I think when he shows up and then he says, okay, like we try and get back what we lost, but I can't lose what I've gained.
What I caught. Yep.
Yeah, like it was something to that measure, like what I've gained in these 5 years, and that was a great line.
It seems like we all really, really enjoyed this movie. So, were there any issues that came up while you were watching this? And ultimately, was this a satisfying ending for this ginormous saga over the last 11 years, pretty much now, of movies?
I'll run through mine really, really fast. No major issues. The second act had some gags that I felt went on a bit much, like the Captain America butt gag. I thought it was silly when Ant-Man said it, and then when Captain said it, it was just kind of like made me roll my eyes a bit, but didn't really. Like, it was still silly. I knew people in our screening who just loved that joke, and I did enjoy Captain saying I could do this all day, I guess, out of that bit. I thought that was, and him getting annoyed by it. And then the biggest glaring issue I had, and it will be fixed, I believe, is Peter Parker reuniting with all his friends at the end, yet none of them have aged 5 years.
And
I
they're
think
still
that
in
this
high
is
school?
something. Yeah, and they're still in high
Yes.
school, but I think that this is honestly something that could be resolved with one line of dialogue, and it's, when Far From Home comes out in July, the logical conclusion, the only one that I can arrive at least, is that all the core kids that we revisit from Homecoming have just returned from being dusted as well. They're picking up where their schooling left off. However, they're finishing up with kids who were 5 years younger when they were dusted, and that this group includes Peter, Ned, MJ, Flash Thompson, etc. But, if they ignore this in Far From Home, it will be a missed opportunity for either a quick joke or even some more serious character development and a relatable traumatic event for these characters to bond over. And just other little time travel things that I had questions about, but for the sake of being a comic book fantasy movie, I'm fine with just giving these all a pass. The scene between Bruce Banner and the Ancient One served as a purpose in resolving a lot of those branch theories, but overall, those were really my only minor issues with the movie.
Yeah, I have to see it again, and then I might be able to pick out some more. But in general, I was thoroughly impressed with how it all went. And I did totally agree, that Spider-Man moment. I was like, wait a second. Wait, is Ned what? So it was just very confusing. But, I then moved along. And then some of the gags just did not work for me either. The thing in the Ant-Man getting the signature. Oh, you want to take a picture? Take a picture with me too? I was just like, okay, too long. It's either
It did go too long. It's
either too long or not long enough. Like in the rules of comedy, like you either have to hit it again and again and again, and then it'll finally get funny, or maybe that joke just doesn't have that life in it and you only make it a couple times.
Just to add to what you said about that, I thought that the punchline was really more him saying "get the hell out of here." Like, he said something at the end that was like had a little bit of a curse in it, and I thought it was kind of funny.
Oh, I think he said, "Take the goddamn phone."
Yes.
Yeah, he's like, "Take the goddamn phone," and I
Yes.
thought that was so funny. But yeah, you're like, the whole thing, it went on a little long, but I did kind of chuckle out of that scene. I think the overall, what the joke was trying to be was funny, but yeah, you're right, it did go a little long.
I'm not sure how I felt about the effects work with Bruce Banner and Hulk. That I just it didn't look quite right to me the whole time.
As Professor Hulk?
Yeah.
Okay.
Not in him being that character, but like the effects of making him that character. Felt like that didn't quite work, because in Ragnarok, Hulk looks very real and very Hulk, and he fits in with everything. Whereas in this, it felt like maybe it was just a much brighter movie, and it's because Ragnarok is pretty saturated, and this is not. So maybe that was why, but I felt something was just a little off visually whenever Banner is on screen. But other than that, I was happy.
I thought it was funny that you mentioned that, though, but just because when he shows up to New Asgard and Valkyrie looks at him and she says, I think I liked you either of the other two ways.
Yep.
It just when you were talking about that, it reminded me of that line.
Yes, and Tessa Thompson. Whew, so good in this. I could also have used more Tessa Thompson.
Oh, yeah. I think all of us could.
Yeah, all more Tessa Thompson. Let's give her own movie now.
A-Force.
For me, it was some of the time jump, time machine stuff. But I was doing, in my brain, I was doing what they said they weren't going to do. Because they had mentioned, movies like, Back to the Future and Terminator and Professor Hulk's it's not like that. It's not so it was clear that they were making their own rules. And I think watching it a second time, I was like, okay, I kind of get it now, especially with, Bruce Banner talking to the Ancient One. I was puzzled when I'm like, well, should Nebula exist in this realm? But, kind of thinking about it and kind of looking at some theories of okay, well, this could work. And it actually opens doors for where we can go in the cosmic realm. Other than maybe a couple jokes that kind of ran on too long, like you guys said, no, I thought this is pretty good. It's for the Russo brothers to kind of sum 22 movie journey in one movie that went 3 hours that could have been 5 or 6 is a pretty damn good job. I think some people don't realize how hard that is, and everybody who kind of got their moment here and there. So other than that, yeah, I thought it was a success.
Yeah, and I liked how they wrapped it up. All those threads pulled together so well.
Yeah, it was definitely a satisfying ending. And I do think some of the gags went on a little too long. By the end, I was a little tired of all the shots of Thor's stomach, regardless of whether he was wearing a shirt or not. I was like, okay.
Yeah, they really made Thor look like the dude.
Yeah.
One of my friends said that he was improperly balanced, he didn't even look like a real person's body, just because he had a strong upper torso. But I love when, don't get me wrong, I'm not a fan of fat jokes are very hard to make, and I don't know, it's a very touchy subject, obviously,
right.
And I thought that they tried to handle it as delicately as they could. Down to his mom telling him to eat a salad. I thought that was kind of endearing, it was his mom. I feel like that's the one person that can get away with saying that. But where Rocket, I have to admit, I did kind of chuckle when Rocket called him, when he said he looked like melted ice cream. I thought that was a really funny line.
Rocket does not hold back. So, he
doesn't hold back. So he gets a pass.
Yeah, I think that was really that. And like you mentioned with the Scott Lang gag earlier, those were sort of the two that I was like, you know what, maybe these went on a little too long and they won't age well upon multiple viewings, but they're things that I was willing to let slide because of everything that this movie was able to accomplish by the end of it. And, the high school thing for Peter, I wasn't paying too close attention. I almost thought they could have moved on to college by then because Peter's clearly smart enough. Does he really need to finish high school? Probably not, but I was told that it was definitely still high school. So it'll be interesting to see how they sort of fix that. And Far From Home is technically going to be the last movie of this phase. So I think it's definitely something they'll fix in that movie, at least hopefully, because otherwise they really screwed up the whole time travel thing.
This could be weird.
I feel like they'd be really, really doing themselves because they're obviously, it's Disney at this point, I guess Sony too, but you know what I mean? They're reading stuff. I mean, that's one thing that I keep seeing people bring up everywhere. And so it's so easy to fix it with a line of dialogue, even if they have to go on set for one day or just record it in a studio somewhere later. It's something that's so easy to fix, at least in my opinion. Just like I said, the logical thing is just say they all got dusted and they're all repeating the end of the year that they were at when they got dusted. So
well, they can't tell Tom Holland because he'll spoil it.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
He should not be given any information. They said that, I think I read that he only got his lines pretty much for Infinity War and Endgame. And
Yeah.
That was it.
That sounds accurate.
He didn't know who he'd be interacting with. Yeah.
Yeah. So where does this rank for all of us?
For me personally, I was thinking about that today. I actually started a Letterboxd account when I did my Captain Marvel summary with a friend recently, and I put this as like number 4 in my top 5, and that top 5 includes Iron Man will always be just I hold it, and it's like trying to rank all of the Pixar movies with Toy Story in the mix. You know, it's just really hard. And I always put Iron Man just because it got me into the genre and really just opened up everything. But I also include in that top 5 Winter Soldier, I think, is my number 2. Number 3, I believe, is the first Avengers. And then I put this one at number 4, followed by Guardians of the Galaxy.
Okay.
So it's kind of where it ranks.
I think this is definitely in my top 5. My number 1 all time is Ragnarok. That is my favorite Marvel movie. I think it's great for so many reasons. And then Winter Soldier is also my number 2. I think that's the one that got the Russo brothers into this whole crazy game, and they deliver so well with this and with Infinity War, in my opinion. And I think this is probably number 3 for me, just with how it all comes together. But it'll change depending on what mood I'm in.
Same.
But top 5, definitely.
Yeah, for me, thinking about it, it's definitely in my top 5. I definitely have Ragnarok up there. I love that movie. Civil War and Winter Soldier are up there for me. And yeah, and Iron Man 2. So it would definitely be 4 or 5 for me. And like Katie said, like depending on the day, it could change. But those 5 are definitely in the mix in my top 5.
It's hard to leave Ragnarok out of there for me personally. Trust me, that was a real. I've reorganized this list so many times since starting it a few months ago. It's insanity, but yeah, it's tough.
Whenever people tell me they haven't watched Thor Ragnarok, I'm just like...
Well, whenever people tell me they watched Thor Ragnarok, loved it, but haven't seen What We Do in the Shadows is when I get especially salty.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it's like, no, you're going right now, and we're going to sit down, and you're going to watch it.
Yeah, I'm in agreement that this is top 5 for me. I hate ranking things, though. So it's one of those things where I would probably put it in like the 4 spot right now. And Winter Soldier is like top tier for me. Although Letterboxd is telling me that based on how I rated these movies, that Endgame would be number 2. So I don't know if I agree with that.
I haven't rated any of mine yet. Now now you reminded me I got to go rate these.
Yeah, I think it's one of those things where I would have to do a complete rewatch of most things, not the first 2 Thor movies, because Katie and I just discussed those, and I don't need to do that again. But
No.
Or Incredible Hulk.
Why put yourself through
Right.
that? Yeah, or Incredible Hulk.
yeah,
No Hulk. That's my bottom. That will always be the worst one for me.
Hulk is, yeah, you know what? I think Hulk is at the bottom of mine too. Yeah, it goes 21 Incredible Hulk, Thor Dark World 22.
yeah.
Poor Edward Norton.
Oops.
Well, if he hadn't gotten his hands in it and rewritten the script to make it in his mind better, maybe we wouldn't call it the worst.
Been all Edward Norton-y.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So one of the last questions before we dive into our final thoughts on the movie is, what was your viewing experience like? The general atmosphere of the crowd? Did you have any, babies crying in your screening or anything like that?
Luckily for me, I've always been extremely fortunate for the blockbusters at least, be able to see them very first screening, opening night, which is, ends up here. It was a Thursday at 5:00 for a fan screening at the Alamo Drafthouse. Shouts to Alamo Drafthouse. I'm a huge fan.
Nice.
We tried actually for this one to get tickets to the IMAX first screening, but a tech company bought out the entire screening, the very first one. I didn't even know that was possible. So we ended up going to Alamo, but I like collecting all the Mondo pint glass and pins that they make in the Birth Movies Death magazine that they put out. So I was thrilled that it got to be the Alamo. And they also they aren't really about showing ads. They show really funny YouTube content, but for that very reason, coupled with the fact that there's usually a lot of adults since they serve alcohol to the seats, it was just a crazy screening. Everyone was loving it. all the reveals. Like I said, this movie was just fan service from beginning to end. Scenes like where everyone shows up at the end, especially for me, seeing Rescue was such a big deal, and I know a lot of people in our theater really enjoyed that. So yeah, it, understandably so, for a screening like that where you have all the diehards of the diehards, it's going to be really intense.
See, and I had the opposite. Because like I said, when I go to a press screening and this was an actual, like, the only people there were press. Usually when they do them, they're other people, like you win tickets on the radio or something like that.
They didn't do that for this one. I know.
They did that one.
Oh, they did. I didn't
Yeah.
we didn't have any in San Francisco. I tried so hard to find any, because we do it for all the movies. We'll sign up for all the contests. I'll ask all my friends to try and sign me up. And yeah, I know what you mean. Where the press gets the first, the good custom seats, and then everyone else kind of fills in the spots around them. Those are fun.
Yes. So here I think they had one Tuesday night, but because I saw it Tuesday afternoon, but this one was just a press screening, and they do those, and those are usually attended by between 10 to 20 people, right? This theater was packed, and it was not, and you can usually bring a +1. I brought my husband, and
Lucky dude.
yeah, he was like, well, I'm taking the day off for that. You definitely. I was like, well, you better get home at this time so we can go. Like, I left my work in a meeting. I told my boss I had planned this, taken the time, and I told my boss, I was like, I might have to leave during the meeting. I have to get there on time.
kind of seeing Endgame early, no big.
Right. Well, she knows I write and stuff, and so, and sadly, nobody else on my work team gives a shit about it. So.
That's me at my office
I'm so
too.
excited.
Yeah.
And everyone else is like, I don't care what you're doing. But anyway, so the majority of the time it's always dead silent. Like, nobody even laughs. It's all very, we are sitting watching this movie very professionally. And this one had a little bit of that. And usually I'm the loudest one in the theater, gasping and crying and whatever. So I'm really excited to see it with an actual audience, and I think we're going next week. I was going to try to go today, but it didn't work out. So I'm looking forward to seeing it with a group of people who are all invested in it, as opposed to just, we're here because we work. So.
Well, for me, Deanna knows the struggle with tickets that I had when they went on sale,
Yes.
because it was like the Hunger Games where
Yep.
we were trying, where like,
And AMC died.
yeah, AMC
Yeah.
app dies, Fandango dies. It seemed like everything died. And my friend actually got in and got us 3 tickets for the Thursday showing for IMAX. So we were like, all right, dope.
Yeah.
We had to be there at least an hour before because they were lining people up. And then we had gotten there so early that we just kind of went into the theater and just like sat down and got like got seats. It was pretty cool. There was like a lady sitting next to us, and once Tony dies, she's like straight up bawling, crying,
Oh no.
like fountain of tears. And like my friend was like, dude, you have a napkin? I was like, why? And then we look over and she's just bawling. He's like, here, just have this. It was pretty cool because like with all the high moments, everybody was like, woo. And then like when it got quiet, everybody kind of like quiet down and like just watched it. It was like with movies like that, it's always fun to like watch it with invested people because, it enhances the experience sometimes. So yeah, our theater experience is actually pretty good.
And it's funny that you mentioned tickets. We had a group of us, 4 of us, on a group chat, get up at 4:30 in the morning the day the tickets went on sale, and we were hammering AMC's app, their website, and we got basically those first, we got a big old group together. We had organized which rows we wanted, so between the 4 of us, we were able to get a group of 22 tickets, an entire row and a half at the Alamo Draft House in the center. And we got tickets for the IMAX Friday showing. And same deal. We had over 20 people for each show. It was insanity. And it was just so much fun. And you're right. When you go with those people who are invested in it, the audience and the theater just become alive. during those moments. And one of my favorite things is to find the reaction videos from like when Thor shows up in Infinity War and everyone goes nuts. Like there's like theater reaction videos that you can find that are really funny. But it's just something to behold with a movie like this.
Yeah. My friends here don't seem to like be as keen on trying to go to the movies like opening weekend necessarily.
Yeah.
So I frequently go to the movies by myself, which I am perfectly fine with. I kind of like not
Same.
having to coordinate with people. So I went to this by myself, and until I want to say late Thursday night or early Friday morning, the seat next to me was empty. It wasn't by the time I got there. And so clearly this person had also gone by themselves, and he just like kept looking over at me during the movie, and I was like, why do you keep looking at me? And then he would look at the person sitting to the right of him too, because I was on an end seat, because I was like, you know what, I don't really like crowds, but I know it's going to be crowded, so I will at least have some breathing room by getting an aisle seat.
Totally.
You jinxed yourself, because I remember you texting me. You're like, the seat is open. The seat is still open. I'm like, oh boy.
Yeah, I did jinx myself. And like the whole, I want to say the first 2 or 3 rows were completely empty, because I went 9 a.m. on a Friday. So a lot of people have to work unless they take the day off, which clearly some people did. There was one baby that I heard in the theater. I heard it briefly, and then it was quiet the rest of the time, because I was going to be very mad if a baby just started crying.
That baby felt your vibes across the
like
theater.
Yeah, pretty much. And then there was someone who was like clearly sick or something who went, because there was like this nasty phlegmy cough that kept happening throughout the thing. And I was like, okay, you know what? I'll let it go. I will let it go, because I'm so used to going by myself, and half the time when I go, it's like a half empty theater, because I have the luxury of going at random times in the middle of the week in the morning. So it wasn't a bad experience overall. I was a little weirded out by the guy who kept looking around to see what other people were doing during the movie. But other than that, I was like...
He's like laughing. He's like, ha ha. And then
yeah, and it was weird because he wasn't really reacting to the movie too much. So I think he was like looking around to see how the people next to him were reacting. I don't know. It was odd. But, you know, this lady wasn't completely bawling, but when Tony died, we did have a person who was audibly crying. She happened to be like the row in front and a seat over. So I was like, man, I really love how into this people get. You know, I was like quietly letting the tears come. But people were like into it.
Yeah, that's how I am. I'm more of a quiet crier. Yeah, I'm more of a quiet crier, but they were definitely tears a-flowing.
Yeah.
both screenings, even when you know it's coming, it just you can't help it. And yeah, I also the other thing I love about the Alamo, and the reason I like going to there for the first screen, not just because you obviously have like the diehards at any opening screening at any theater, but they also do this really cool Mondo pint glass and pins and stuff. So it's just, you know, it's fun for me to be able to go there and collect all the swag the night of. But yeah, it was I'm both showings that I went to, obviously the first being a little bit more crazy, but it was, people are really invested in this stuff.
Yeah.
And it's hard to remember that sometimes, because I have a few friends that are into it and I can text them about it and we go crazy theorizing about everything. And then everyone else is just like, I can't believe you care that much about something to see 22 films that are all the same.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, no, they're not all the same.
No, definitely not.
Only some of them.
Only the early couple.
Yeah. Real quick, I want to definitely discuss the little post-credits sound. MJ, I know you said you didn't stay for the credits, but basically there was clanking metal, and
I heard it. Yeah, I heard about it.
There's a little bit of a disagreement on whether or not it was a callback to Iron Man and him making the suit in that, or if it was sort of, you know, Katie and I were texting about this, if it was a nod to Doctor Doom possibly coming in future stories.
I hadn't heard that one yet. That's a cool one. I would love that, but I just feel like we would have been shown a stinger. I do think it's probably that Iron Man clang. You know, his film started the whole thing, but that's a really interesting theory. I would love to just see that character in general in the MCU at some point.
Total credit to Katie for that one.
That's great.
Yeah.
Well, I would love that, because Deanne, you know how much I love Doom, and you know how much I want him to be the next bad villain, so I would love that.
It would have to be someone big, too. You know, we can't follow up Thanos with, you know, some random dude who, like, isn't really going to do much. It has to be, like, something like Doctor Doom, and then that leads into Galactus or something like that.
I was about to say Galactus was my choice, but yeah, Doctor Doom also makes sense, especially if we want. I hate talking trash on those first Fantastic Four movies, but honestly, I'd still rather have something like that than what we got. With the reboot recently, and I think there's a lot to be mined from that. And now Marvel has the ability, or Disney, I should say, has the ability to right a lot of wrongs with the properties they own.
See, I think it makes sense that because they didn't have time to do anything.
Right.
They didn't have the rights to any of those characters until so recently. I was like, well, maybe that's why.
And ultimately, I'm okay with it. I was a little bummed, but I'm actually okay with it because that was one of the things my dad always says about the movies that he enjoys the Marvel movies. He doesn't watch all of them, but he enjoys them enough to check them out occasionally. And he says, every movie's just an advertisement for the next movie. And I'm like, well, have you ever read comic books?
Yeah,
exactly. I know you like watching Next Generation Star Trek. I mean, I guess that's more contained episodes, but things continue. That's how things work. And that to me was actually kind of nice about not having them in this, was that it was kind of a little bit more finite or, book ending.
Yeah. Well, I know MJ, you're in a little more of a time crunch than the rest of us. So do you have any final thoughts on Endgame before we get into, Spider-Man really wrapping things up and then what comes next?
Listen, man, the Russo brothers did a bang up job on this movie. You know what I mean? They said that, Infinity War was more, Thanos was he was the main character. It was his movie. This movie, I felt like, was the hero's movie. Okay, how do we, you know what I mean? With the other movies, like the Avengers, either fighting themselves, but when they weren't, it was like, okay, they won. You saw them have to bounce back from almost losing everything or losing a piece of themselves or even remembering things that they've lost and come together for one last run in this iteration. And I thought, with the monumental task in front of them, they did a really good job. It was a really satisfying ending to this Infinity Saga that we've been invested in for almost 11 damn years. I still can't believe that, I've been with, Tony Stark and Captain America. I've been growing up with these characters for so long. And it felt that the payoff with everything just felt worth it. It just felt really worth it. Kind of like a Saturday morning cartoon. It was just the end of one thing, and now we kind of see where Marvel and Disney go with the next thing.
Jonathan, any final thoughts on the movie from you?
I feel like MJ did a great job. I think that everyone will talk about the payoff, and I think the payoff was worth it. I think they handled everything with such grace and respect to what had come before it. The Russo brothers really, I really hope that Marvel does a good job securing them for future movies. It sounds like they're interested in lots of things that they want to do, and I don't see why Disney wouldn't just give them carte blanche to do whatever the hell they want now.
Secret Wars.
Yeah, I'm hoping for that.
Yeah, Secret Wars wasn't that the one that they said that they really wanted to do? So overall, I was just very happy. I felt like I said, they gave me the ending that I told myself I didn't want, but ended up loving, Iron Man passing, it was just I like a good movie. Good movies shock and surprise you, and they make you wonder what you think. And we're going to be thinking about this movie for a long time. It's funny, between Infinity War and this one, we spent the year anticipating what was coming next, but I feel like the next year is going to be me responding and reacting to this movie and dealing with what next.
Yeah.
Not what happens to them. It's more where do we go from here? And so they've done just such a great job setting that up, and I am more excited than ever now. And they really have big shoes to fill now. They did such a good job with this, but I believe that Disney and Feige and all of them have a big part in that, and we're in good hands.
Yeah, and we will definitely do some speculation in a moment here because I know there's so much on that front too. But Katie, any final thoughts from you?
Oh gosh, so many thoughts. I really was impressed with this movie. I was like 99% sure they were going to pull it off because I saw what they were going for in Infinity War, like how they were wrapping things up story-wise, like how they were going to get there. And I trusted them to be able to do this because like we saw them come into this. The Russo brothers came into this with the Winter Soldier, and that movie, I maintain, is where the MCU grows. That's what really kicks off having a unique style to the films. Before that, things had just kind of all been, they hadn't really figured out what they wanted to do yet. But then when Winter Soldier happens, it really changes the dynamic of how they let these films be made and what they went for. And watching it felt like reading the last book in a really great series. I made a comparison on another podcast I did to Harry Potter. For those of you who have read Harry Potter, you know, especially if you were old enough to read them as they were coming out, you read the last book and you're like, oh my God, it's all coming together. They've been planning this forever. And that's how I felt with Endgame. It was all these little tie-ins and all these little plot threads that had been, some very conspicuously and some not, dangling. And now everything gets not all wrapped up in a neat bow. It's a messy bow, but it's a good bow. And it makes it...
It's a pretty bow.
It is. It's a very pretty bow. And we still have, you know, it's not the end, but it's the end of, it's not the end of everything, but it's the end of something. And I don't think we'll get this from Marvel again. I think they will not go this particular route to tell their stories. I think they are going to try something new and branch out. So I was just blown away, and I was so happy that they managed to make it work and give us something that we've all been hoping for a long, long time.
Yeah, it's one of those things where it's definitely the end of an era, but the story is not over by any means. So that wraps up our Endgame discussion. So we're going to begin some speculation now. MJ had a prior commitment, so Jonathan and Katie are still here to go over a little bit of what could come next. And one of the things we already know that Marvel is working on are the shows for Disney Plus. And I think they are taking characters that we haven't necessarily seen a lot of in the MCU and giving them their own shows. We know about Wanda and Vision and their relationship, but we don't really have the proper amount of time to dive into that the way that they have done in the comics and things like that. And then you are getting, I believe, a Bucky and Falcon show.
Falcon and Winter Soldier is, I believe, what it's called.
Yep.
Yeah, so we have a few of these sort of team-ups, so to speak, and I really feel like Falcon and Winter Soldier will be more like the buddy cop scenario, whereas WandaVision will be focusing on that relationship and those two characters. But I think in the grand scheme of things, we might not see, well, we definitely won't see Vision in future movies because they definitely did not bring Vision back. And it'll just be nice to sort of get that additional content for those who want it. And at the price point that Disney Plus is starting at, they have my money already.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, my God. That was, what a killer announcement that was.
Yeah.
$6.99 a month, $70 for a year. It's like a total no-brainer, especially for people like me. I buy all of the Marvel movies on digital on iTunes, but I just got 4K televisions in our house, and none of the Marvel movies, save for Spider-Man, because it's under Sony, are in 4K on the iTunes side. You'd have to buy a Blu-ray 4K, 4K Blu-ray or DVD or whatever it's called. You would have to get that to get it in 4K now. And so, you know, one service where I get most of their titles in 4K, hopefully, you know, Pixar as well, that you got my money easily.
Yeah.
Yeah, it sounds so exciting. There's just going to be so much on there, and I'm intrigued to see how they're going to make these shows happen.
Yeah, I'm just curious, like the overall look. I believe that I read Feige had said something like they will have ramifications and character development that crosses over into the films as well. So, they're definitely doing their best to say, give us all your money. You're not, just like the films, you're not going to want to miss this. And hopefully a little bit more involved than the shows like Netflix and Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., where even though they were good on their own, they didn't quite tie into the universe, nor could they. And now that they also have a little bit less to work with and more to work with, in the sense where they have new characters to introduce, but they have less of the old team to work with. So it's going to be really interesting to see how they carry it out, at least with the new original shows. I know that they had talked about as well something called, I believe, What If, where like one of the and I think one of them is the idea that Peggy becomes Captain America and that Steve Rogers doesn't get the super serum. And I'm excited to see that too. I just like content, anything by Disney.
We're
at
all
this point. Yeah.
I think with the What If stories, those will be fun because they're typically one shots that just tell this fun story, and they're longer.
Yeah.
They're not, a 22 page issue or anything. I think for the most part they fall somewhere in the 30 to 40 range, maybe, as far as pages. And they've done fun things like, Punisher kills the Marvel universe and things like that. So there's a lot of flexibility with that show in particular, and it'll be interesting to see if they choose to use Disney Plus as a way to maybe introduce characters that they might want to put on the big screen at some point, because based on what we've seen between the MCU and Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., they're willing to let their characters in the TV shows appear as their characters in the movies too. They don't recast, which I think has been one of those topics of conversation surrounding DC because of how many people watch the CW shows, but then it's totally different people playing the same characters on the big screen. And I think Marvel and Disney sort of have a better balance of that. But I do want to talk about where the actual MCU goes from here, because Katie, you touched on how you don't think they will necessarily go as big with a story. And I would really love to see these, maybe 3 to 5 movie arcs where we get sort of more contained stories instead of doing a whole 20 plus movie story arc that everything just culminates in this huge ending, because they already have people roped in. They don't have to do too much more of that, because they took these B and C list characters and made them A-list characters with those movies because they didn't have the rights to their A-list characters. And now they have some of those A-list characters, so they shouldn't have to try too hard to, do a story arc maybe with Doom or Galactus that is more focused on the Fantastic Four down the line, and we finally get, a good version of those characters.
Yeah, I agree. I think it'll be interesting because Feige is, like I think you said earlier, Feige has stated that what happens in these shows that they're making matters. So that gives them a lot more options. And from what I've read that Feige has talked about is that he is planning to do something different because they've already done this big epic, and now they can spread the net wider, as it were. It can give us more stories about more people and allow the Marvel Universe to both get bigger with how much it's covering and smaller and telling small stories about individuals, like some of the earlier films feel.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm excited for that. And, a piece of me selfishly hopes that a new group will go under the name Avengers. But I think Katie, you'd either mentioned it or someone else had told me that they had hoped it would be like 5 years out, not super soon. Like we've got to build up new characters and get us caring about these new characters in smaller, intimate movies again. That was what Marvel did so wonderfully from the beginning, was really getting us to care about these characters meeting. And to do that, we have to care about the characters on their own. And so I think there's a lot of potential for that, obviously, with whatever they announce next. And I hope that we do I do like the idea of it being like phase 4, going into phase 4, even if it's about a whole new group, that's fine to me. And I don't know what the big bad threat will be a few years from now that requires some group of these individuals to team up, whether it's under the Avengers or whatnot. But I'm excited to see what they do. I think what we know is coming is we have Black Panther 2. I believe that Scott Derrickson, the director of Doctor Strange, made it sound like he had got some work in on a new Doctor Strange movie.
Yeah, he's set to direct.
Yeah, I hope we get, like I said, selfishly hope we get another Ant-Man movie, just because of what they set up with the time jump and everything. I'm really excited about that. Gosh, I mean, there's Eternals, which I don't even know about, but I think that's pretty much being cast. I think Angelina Jolie has a role in that.
And Kumail Nanjiani.
That'll be great. I'm excited. Yep. I think he's in the new Men in Black movie, and I suspect he's going to be an alien somehow. I don't know what he's going to be, and I welcome anything he does because he's just a gem.
He is.
But I could totally see him voicing an alien or doing something cool just because and I think, it's amazing how fast and impressive his career has been. And it's just so fun to watch him. Anything he's in is just funny. So I'm excited if he's going to be part of the MCU. That's going to be great, where everyone's going to benefit from that. But there's a lot of stuff. Admittedly, like I said, I'm a very moderate comic book fan. Like, I enjoy it more now, and I've started reading it more now. But I don't have a lot of the history associated with a lot of the people that go to these films. I was into X-Men comics as a kid. Loved the X-Men, the early X-Men movies, even though I didn't really have a lot to compare them to at the time. And yeah, I'm sure that Katie, it sounds like you know a bunch about this stuff that you can lend your expertise to. I'm curious to hear what you think is coming next.
Oh, I read lots and lots and lots about it because I am fascinated, and especially because I'm a huge X fan as well. So I know that they haven't announced anything with that, of course, because that's all new for them. But they have cast the Eternals a little bit, and Chloe Zhao is directing it, and that is super exciting.
What else has she done?
She did this really small documentary I think it's called The Rider, and she's got a lot of award recognition for it last year. She's finally they've been offering up-and-coming woman director, as they like to do in Marvel Universe with men. So she's a very emotional filmmaker. Like, her films have lots of emotion and depth to them. So, and she's very involved in how it all gets put together. And so I'm excited to see what she can bring, especially since I don't know very much about the Eternals.
I think most people don't, because it was something that Jack Kirby started, and I don't think he ever really finished his work on it before going over to DC and working on the New Gods.
Okay.
But I was reading up on it a little, and the gist of it is that the Eternals were supposed to be the protectors of Earth, but in this version of events, obviously that was the Avengers. So I think because they've already sort of established the idea of space within the MCU thanks to Guardians of the Galaxy and now Captain Marvel, that opened things up for them to explore more of these Avenger-like characters, I guess, within space. We're obviously probably going to get Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 now, since they have fixed that whole situation.
Oh, it is. It's happening.
Okay.
Yeah, it's happening. They've announced it.
James got brought back, thank God. I'm really happy that everyone could kind of come to their senses collectively on that one, and get him back. Because honestly, I can't believe even just saying this, and but it made my weekend getting that news that he had been brought back, because I thought it had once again just hearing also the Patty Jenkins story, like, it sounds like they've got a few but bad screw ups in their history. And I was not looking forward to another one. And, obviously Guardians is James and James is Guardians. It's, just everything down to that open cast letter. So I'm glad that Guardians is happening. That's another one I should have mentioned. We know Guardians 3 is coming. So after Suicide Squad 2.
Well, and the other thing we haven't talked about yet is Shang-Chi.
Yeah.
They've announced, who I also know nothing about.
Same.
But that one is definitely
same.
forthcoming. So I'm interested in that they'll finally give, this will be their first big Asian superhero.
Yeah.
And I have heard talk that they are going to be introducing a queer character.
Yeah.
Superhero soon.
Okay.
So that is also very exciting, but I don't think they've given us any info about who or who it is or when they will make an appearance.
I think for me, I will be doing a lot of Marvel Unlimited reading to sort of get up to speed on the Eternals and just some of the potential storylines that they could cover going forward. And I know we also want to talk about, you know, getting more films under the Avengers name. And A-Force immediately came to mind when they have that shot with Captain Marvel holding the gauntlet and all of the women just come to make sure she gets the gauntlet where it needs to go. And they tease you just for such a brief moment with the A-Force. And even though it's not the exact lineup from the comics, if I'm not mistaken, I think A-Force came out of Secret Wars. And that's something that I will definitely be diving into in the comics too. And obviously you have other Avengers titles that could pop up, West Coast Avengers, Young Avengers, and you know, we saw Clint call his own daughter Hawkeye, and even though her name is not Kate Bishop, you know, Marvel does like to twist the stories a little bit to work them to their advantage.
Just because you brought up Kate Bishop, I thought that I had read, and I don't know if it's one that they actually made as an announcement at their Disney Plus unveiling, but I had read that Hawkeye was getting a show too with Kate Bishop. Now, I that could all just be speculation based on the fact that like someone heard that Hawkeye's getting a show. But I would absolutely, knowing what I now know about Kate Bishop, what I've kind of been reading. I mean, the possibilities are just so endless. It's so exciting, and then also since just because we were talking about potentially getting more inclusive roles and just broadening the perspective of what a superhero can be. I really love and I know it's not a main character, but that nod, just talking about Endgame again, that character that one of the Russo brothers played was just, that was, I think, one of the, off the top of my head, one of the first times they'd prominently put a storyline from a gay character in there, even though it was very small. It was just, that was such a powerful scene. And I remember, just both times he just really knocked it out of the park. And I believe also his daughter, since we're on the topic of others, I believe his daughter is the one with the bow and arrow. Hawkeye's daughter is one of
I
the
did
Russo
catch that
brothers.
on IMDb too. And Variety did report that there is supposed to be a Hawkeye show with Kate Bishop, and Jeremy Renner would be back to reprise his role as Clint Barton. So that's definitely something that we could see happening for the future. The show will lead to the introduction of this character, a soft introduction, so to speak, and then maybe she would make that step to the big screen. There are just so many possibilities now that Disney's doing Disney Plus later this year because, we know we're getting Spider-Man Far From Home. I think they moved it up to July 2nd so they could capitalize on 4th of July weekend pretty much. And after that, I imagine Comic-Con will be where they start announcing a bunch of stuff because that starts 15 days after Spider-Man premieres.
And I think they skipped Comic-Con last year or the year before, something like that. But yeah, I miss, we haven't had in so long. It's crazy. I remember the slate for the phase 3 getting unveiled, and it just seems like ages ago now. And it really was. It was probably about 5 years ago or something like that. Like it was right before Age of Ultron came out. So
yeah,
it was close to that, something like that. So yeah, we don't have anything like that, and I know that they're going to give us that eventually. And whether it's their own event or if I'd love to see it at Comic-Con. I would just love to go to Comic-Con. If anyone hears this and takes sympathy on me,
I might have a chance to go as press, but it is TBD right now.
You should absolutely take it.
That would be awesome, and I would probably be drowning in news at the same time.
Yep.
We did touch already on what we think a Black Widow origin film would possibly be. And with the de-aging stuff that they have already done, like you mentioned earlier, Jonathan, it wouldn't be a problem to keep Scarlett Johansson on. And once she hasn't really aged that much because Hollywood.
She hasn't aged, exactly. We had this exact same conversation. I was just like, she looks incredible. Like she doesn't need any of that technology. And I think they kind of touched on that in Age of Ultron. I think they had her in a few like scenes going back to her traumatic stuff with her upbringing. But She looks fine. I don't think that but yeah, you're right. Because they have it, they can, if they want to, they can do whatever the hell they want. I mean, it literally looks seamless with Samuel L. Jackson and everyone else that they've done it with. It doesn't seem weird. It just seems, it seems like what you're seeing is impossible. And that's how good it is. I mean, even down to Tony Stark, and I think it was Age of Ultron or Civil War, actually, I guess, when they're showing off that memory.
Oh, yeah.
Christmas, and it's just like, wow, you can't believe it. It just looks so real.
Yeah.
That the possibilities really are endless. I would love to see more old Samuel L. Jackson, or younger Samuel L. Jackson. That was just so fun. Far From Home, I'm excited just because it's going to be our first fresh taste after such a giant. We're going to need it's a palate cleanser, really,
right?
And that's kind of how I felt. In a lot of ways, that's kind of how I felt about Ant-Man and the Wasp after Infinity War. It was a little bit more of a contained thing, and this will be exciting. So. Also, I have to echo what you said about, was it Marvel Unlimited? I'm buying an iPad again just so I can start reading on the thing again, because I love, now that I've gotten back into comics.
That's a big commitment.
It is. I've been reading Walking Dead.
Okay.
I recently got into The Walking Dead, and out of each book is something like 12 issues, and I've on book 14 of 15 now. And so I'm already past where the show is right now, and I've enjoyed it so much, and I love physically turning the pages, but all my friends that have iPads and things like Marvel Unlimited and whatnot, they say it's great to be able to actually zoom in and look at certain things a certain way on that format. So I'm pretty pumped about that. I'm going to get a bunch of, I too will also be looking into the Eternals and the Secret Wars when I'm in Hawaii with my family, next month. I'm really excited about that. So hopefully have more to talk about next time I get to hopefully join y'all for a talk, because that was a lot of fun.
Yeah, definitely. Is there any other quick speculation we want to do here?
I feel like I've actually covered everything. I think the only thing I wanted, like you said, I would love that scene that built upon what we got in Infinity War with all of the women teaming up for that was just awesome. I love that Marvel is now in a place where they're just going to run towards, things that are new and exciting and things that people have wanted for a long time, just like that. I mean, we should be embracing all of these things, and that was such a wonderful scene. But yeah, everything I've seen so far, I also wonder if Guardians 3 will be a redemption or discovery arc for that new Gamora, and whether Adam Warlock will actually play into it, or if James Gunn was just doing that for fun. But yeah, that's pretty much. I also, trying to think about, if we did get another Avengers or whatever it may be, A-Force, who would lead it? Would it be, Shuri is the new improved team, Tony is Captain Marvel, the new lead, Peter Parker, where does he fit in on all this? One thing I think that a lot of us didn't even mention throughout this thing was how awesome Pepper Potts was as Rescue.
Yes, I knew we would forget something.
She's so good.
But it goes back to Tony making that comment about her never wearing anything he gives her.
Wearing what he gets her. Oh, God. It was so great. And also, just, I don't know if we talked about, I know we talked a little bit about the flashback or, the time travel stuff, but that whole conversation Tony has with his dad and wanting to tell him that he has a kid, he technically has a granddaughter that he doesn't know about, and he just wants to be able to tell his dad that he ended up having a kid. There were so many great things, but yeah, that Pepper Potts' rescue, I hope that we get more of that somewhere down the line.
I don't know if we will, though, because I think Gwyneth said she was done.
She's done, I think, but for the right amount of money.
They're going to throw all the money at her now.
Yeah, I mean,
right?
That whole thing. I mean, that was one of the things that was leaked out onto the internet a few months ago. I definitely saw a few things that kind of gave me an idea of where they would take some of this, but I loved her as Rescue. And, they kind of hinted towards that in Iron Man 3 when she wears the suit a little bit. So it was, once again, a nice payoff. What about you, Katie? How do you, anything we missed or anything you feel like, you're excited about potentially?
I am really looking forward to the next Captain Marvel movie. I've already said that, but I suspect that she's going to open up the worlds of the cosmic universe. I'm wondering how much, because I don't know how much time she'll spend on Earth, because she's already such a cosmic character that it seems like Earth's
so boring now. It seems like everything they've done, everything they can do with Earth, and now it's like all we want is the cosmic. I'm super pumped for Captain Marvel too.
Yeah, I'm so fascinated to see where they're going to go with that. And I mean, we touched on so much on this episode, and I loved doing it. And I think I just have to say again how great this whole experience has been. Like, this, not only is it a great movie, it is a great comic book movie. I mean, Alan Moore has talked about how, creator of Watchmen, for those who don't know, Alan Moore has talked about how, like, you can write stories in comics that you can't make in any other form.
Yeah.
And that's been true for a long time. But I think this is the first. With this movie, they really showed that they could do something that's like a comic book. Because more than anything else for me, watching this felt like reading that final issue, for me, I think the first one of those I read was the Batman, where Gotham gets entirely shut down and is declared a no man's land.
Okay,
That's it.
yeah.
Batman No Man's Land was my first, like, huge long thing that I read. And when you read that last issue of it, you're just so satisfied, and all the plots have come together, and all these heroes have had their moments, and that, more than anything, is what this experience felt like for me. So I'm so pleased, and it feels like, good job, guys. You really pulled it off.
We can rest easy knowing this happened,
Yep.
like everything was in good hands. And, honestly, like, just even further past the movies, like the amount of the friends and stuff that I've made along the way that have bonded over their love of this. Like, I think Iron Man and all of this started to develop around the time that the internet was really taking off. And, we're now in a time where, it's not uncool to play video games. It's not uncool to have interests in comic books. They are part of the zeitgeist now. Things have changed. Right. And, I look, when I was cleaning out my garage, I was going full blown Marie Kondo on my house and garage a few weeks ago. And I found these amazing scenes from, I'm looking at it now, so I'm turning my head, but I have some actual pages, some ink pages, like proof pages from Wonder Woman and from something with Wolverine, but a family friend of, or not even a family friend, a person that my dad knew through work somehow, was married at the time to one of these inkers who had done Spider-Man and all this other amazing stuff. And I found this in my garage in storage, and I've dusted it up and put it up in my house. And I just I don't think child me knew how important and amazing this would go on to be. Yeah. And it's signed to me from the inker. And I've looked him up since, and he's, still very prolific in that community. And it was, when I was a kid, it was just such a small thing. And you were a huge, I watched the X-Men cartoons and I read the X-Men comics, and I got my dad, I used to buy Wizard when I was a kid. I don't even know if Wizard's still a thing. It might be.
It is, as far as I know.
Yeah. And I have the first appearance of Gambit from X-Men in decent condition. And the first appearance of, I just remember my dad taking me and buying me this just destroyed Hulk 181 with Wolverine, just because I liked it and I wanted to thumb through it, and it didn't matter if it was all destroyed. So I can understand a lot of what some people are feeling, that they're just so relieved that this has become such a facet of pop culture. And I'm just really, like Katie said, I'm just grateful that they stuck the landing and they gave us something so satisfying to finish it with.
Yeah, Marvel has done something that not many other companies or franchises can say that they have done. Obviously, Star Wars would come close, but they took a lot more time to get their story done, because that you had the first trilogy, you had the prequel trilogy, and now you have the current trilogy,
which put a bad taste in everyone's mouth. That then they waited, and now they're kind of in this. I think that all of the focus at Disney is shifting towards Star Wars. I think, obviously a little bit towards the next Toy Story, which arguably I'm kind of not sure how I feel about yet, but I will see it. But I really wonder, like, I don't think Star Wars, honestly, I don't think Star Wars is going to be able to match this. And I'm excited to see what JJ does with it. I was really excited, and I still think that there's a lot of good that Rian Johnson did. He didn't deliver what I was hoping he would, but I think that Star Wars is kind of an interesting spot now too. And, you know, once again with Disney Plus, where does that play out with like The Mandalorian and stuff? So Disney's got a lot of cards that they're holding close to the chest that we will be able to see in November, I think is when Disney Plus comes out.
Yeah, it'll launch in November, and they just have all the money anyway. So I'm pretty confident that no matter what Disney ends up doing, they'll be able to figure it out in a way that a lot of fans end up enjoying, especially with the Marvel shows and Star Wars. You know, Disney just has so much. Like, I don't even know how Disney exists because it's just so much all the time.
Have you, I mean, you live in Orange County. I actually just went to Disneyland for the first time in over 20 years.
I rarely go if it makes you feel any better.
Oh my gosh. Well, yeah, all of my friends in LA that have like these annual passes and whatnot, but like, oh my gosh, it has changed. I mean, it's still the same amazing place, but the fact that technology, they've embraced it so much to the point where, like, you know, you can use the app to get the fast pass, or you can order food. Like, it would be amazing. You see this long line of people, and then you use the app and you'd skip the whole line to go get your Dole Whip. And I spent so much money at Disney that day because they've embraced enamel pins, and enamel pins is something I'm so into. So I bought so many pins. You're right. Disney has all the money, and honestly, even with all of my, you know, not all, but, you know, the disagreements that I have with what they have done with some of the Star Wars stuff, I'm just happy that more of it's getting made and it's expanding to a new generation. And that's all that really matters. Like, that other people get to continue to enjoy this, and that continues to be relevant through things like this. I'm just glad Disney's taking a try on it.
Yeah, Marvel has been able to do that through the years too, even though they went through those hard times, you know, with bankruptcy and having to sell off the rights to a lot of their big characters. You know, even in the comics, you can tell how Marvel has been changing, and I think the MCU has really embraced that. But I think, you know, we've covered a lot here.
I have one last thing I want to bring up. And I just realized we didn't talk about Deadpool at all.
We did not.
And I'm just curious, like, does anyone, I mean, I guess that's could be a whole long thing, but we do know that I think Alan Horn or someone on the Disney side said that they're going to let it continue to be rated R. So that's also, I guess, just as a way to think, you know, that they're going to try new things. They're going to try new things.
And they have, I believe, like an animated Howard the Duck show coming from like Kevin Smith or something. And
Oh God, that's right.
I've heard that some of the more mature shows might end up on Hulu instead of Disney Plus. I'm not 100% certain on that because Disney now owns such a big stake in Hulu as well.
Right.
So yeah, Disney is just going to do everything apparently, and I fully expect Deadpool to be in their plans based on how beloved that character has become through the first two movies. And whether or not they incorporate him into X-Men, that would be interesting, obviously, because you then would have to have a rated R X-Men movie, and I kind of want to know what that looks like.
Me too.
Yeah, well, I guess we kind of got a piece with Logan, and that was cool. But yeah, I'm super excited, and I think I think everyone can agree, it's just an amazing time to be a fan of comics and superheroes right now.
Yeah.
We're just overwhelmed with all of it, and Disney is very much leading the charge, and I'm totally okay with that. Give me more. So yeah, I've really, and I hope as more of this comes out that I get to talk to all of you more, because I had such a delightful time talking about this. I just love meeting other people that are into it as well. And, you know, that group that we put together to go see Endgame was just a real obvious way to see how much this has grown. You know, our group was evenly split, men and women, and everyone just was so happy to be there.
Yeah, definitely. You picked quite the episode as your first episode here. And I know, Jonathan, you will be back on. We have plans to talk about Logan soon. And
oh yes,
Katie, you are always around.
I am.
Again, thank you both for coming on to talk about the movie and to stick around for some speculation. To our listeners, you can follow us at Geekdom Pod on Twitter. Welcome to Geekdom on Instagram. We are at Welcome to Geekdom on Facebook as well. And as always, thank you all for listening, and we hope you enjoy the rest of your day.